I'm going to give you a chunk of my testimony this morning, as opposed to a regular sermon. This will be a little bit different than you regular folks are used to. And I've got all of these notes I made for myself, and I thought to myself, why are you? This is your story. You really ought to know it. I mean, why do you need notes for? But I'm not going to give you everything. See, I want to be careful just to give you the things that I think will fit for today. Amen. But let's read Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. It's a very familiar and popular verse. It says, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose." Now I realize that I have taught on this verse many times. Many people look at it, and their take on this verse, lifted out of context, they will say, well, that's a promise to me, so that if I'm a Christian, no matter what occurs, God's in it, He'll fix it, it's for my good. No matter how bad it looks, then He is working in it for my good. Well, that is not always necessarily true. There is the flesh, and you can make dumb, bad decisions and reap consequences of it. That God was never God's intention for you at all. And my belief that this verse, set in the proper context, is if you are seeking God and you have a prayer life and you're standing on the promises and you're drawing upon Him and listening to Him, then things do work together. And everything that comes into your life is not necessarily God, but despite that fact, He will give you victory in it. All right? Now, having said all of that, and that's what I've taught for years, I just want to say that sometimes, even when we are outside of God's, how shall I say it, outside the barriers or outside the hedge with our life, that we're not really seeking after Him, we're not really going after Him, nevertheless, He will use those adverse circumstances that will come into your life if you're outside of Jesus. He will use those to nudge you back to Himself. He didn't send them. But you're going to have tribulation just by virtue of the fact that you live in a fallen world. And so what He's trying to do is to get you back in the hedge, inside the hedge of His protection and His dealing and His promises and all the good things that come with Him. But I have learned that sometimes the events in life come in ugly packages, even if they are a good present to me or bring good into my life. You know, sometimes the doorbell rings, particularly at this time of year, and so I go and open it up, and there's the mail lady, and she has this ugly brown, not very festive wrapped box, and she hands it to me. And if I didn't know that this was a Christmas gift, I wouldn't take much notice of it. But you get it inside, and you open it up, and there's something good in there. And usually it's for Teresa. But that's good too. But sometimes the events of life come in the brown paper bag or brown box that don't appeal at all. But when they're finally opened up, there's good that can come out of it. It's because God wants to draw you to Himself. And so with those words, I want to give you part of my testimony this morning. I remembered today, back in 1972, probably it was in March, I went into a coffee shop and sat down. And I sat down with this guy, and he said, "Hello, my name is Dwight Ham." Now, I need to set this up a little bit more. Who is Dwight Ham and why is he important to you? Well, at the moment, I didn't know him. But when he said that word, it clicked. I've heard that name before. Who is Dwight Ham? Now, at that time, I was a milkman. I had recently gotten out of the Army, and that was the best job I could find, and so I took it. Got up early in the morning. It was one of those packages that wasn't very pretty. I mean, at 4:30 in the morning and you're out there hitting it already, it's just tough. But one of the little traditions that grew up with that company's milkmen is that we hit it early, and then about 7:30 we would all go have coffee together. And so my supervisor had set me up with this guy. He had started about the same time I had, but I had not seen him. And so he was just trying to get me introduced to some of the guys, and he said, down here, here's a new guy. And so Dwight Ham reached his hand across, introduced himself to me. And I thought, where have I heard this name? And he said, I know your wife. Now, I don't want to go into that part of the story. I was married to another woman then, other than Teresa, but I have to set up and give you some background up to this moment. I was pre that marriage and pre my military service, I was a wicked and wild and crazy, run around doing every kind of thing that was not wholesome kind of guy. And I met this girl, and we had decided to get married. I was going to college, but I had gotten extremely tired of everything. I was trying to put myself through college. I was working. I was going to school. And on top of all of that, I was partying, and as a result, I basically flunked out. Now, in those days, and it was not fashionable to be patriotic like I am now and like many of you are in our society as a whole. It was not the cool thing to be patriotic. And so the thing that loomed on my horizon then with all this partying life and flunking out of school is that I was about to be drafted into the military. The Vietnam War was going on hard and heavy. This was in 1970. People were being killed in droves, young men like me. And I, just to be honest with you, did not want to go. And I was living a lifestyle that was so hellish, and which is curious because, I was saved. When I was 7 years old, I was sitting in church. I just felt this tug on my heart. The preacher offered an opportunity to come forward, and I don't remember what was preached that day. I don't remember what sermon was, what songs were sung. I just know it was in the spring of the year, and then suddenly I had this thing in my heart. I need to go up there, and I did, and I got up there, and he had some words with me, and then he turned me around to face the congregation, and it was huge. There maybe were 20 people there. And he presented me, and I thought, what in the world am I doing up here? But with my lack of understanding and everything, it took. And I gave my heart to the Lord, and a couple of weeks later I was baptized in water. And I had a fairly godly upbringing and served the Lord and knew Him. But in my teen years, I just, other things became more important to me, and I just went into that spiral downward until I was not serving God at all. And it wasn't so much that I hated God or anything like that. I just didn't have time for Him. I didn't have any interest in Him. I was basically indifferent to Him. And so if anybody had asked me, I would say, well, yeah, I'm saved. But that's all there was to it for me. And I had no interest. And as a result, there were no boundaries in my life. And so I just did anything that came into my wicked little heart, my carnal little heart, and did it. And so I came to the place where I was faced with this draft, and I wanted to avoid it. And so there was just something about it. I knew that I was eligible, and I even got a physical. They called me up, sent me in there, and that's a whole story in itself. But I passed that physical. And so I was right, but there was just something, I said, well, I don't want to go, so I probably won't have to. But there was this thing in me, I thought, well, I want to make sure. So then, I had no time for God up until then. And now that the pressure was beginning to come on and time was getting close, I began to go to God. And I can remember driving and talking to Him in my car. And I began to bargain with Him, and I was saying, if you'll keep me out of the draft and I'll not have to go to the Army, I'll serve you. I'll serve you with everything that's in me. And I meant it. God didn't listen to that. He won't bargain. He wants you unreservedly, never mind what kind of bargain you want to strike with Him. He wants you lock, stock barrel. He wants all of you. And it's for our own good, but I didn't realize it at the time. And so I was basically trying to manipulate God. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I want out of this draft, so I want you to do it, so I'll serve you if you... Now, you know what would have happened if he'd have gotten me out of it. I might have kept it up for a month, but then I'd fallen away. I mean, that's what would have happened. So he gave me a package. He allowed me. Did not step in. I was drafted. Now, here's the way it worked. Anybody here ever drafted into the military? Do you have a feel for... Okay, Bill, Willis, all right. You remember, you get a notice in the mail. Now remember, in some way I just thought, well, it won't light on me. I get this notice in the mail and it says, greetings. Every one of them do that. We used to joke about it, but it was not funny when it came to my house. I had just gotten married. I had a job. I was going to school, getting back, trying to get my life in order. Greetings. Show up at thus and such place for an induction physical. I thought, a physical? I'm not really going in. They're going to give me another physical. And so I said, I am going to flunk this one. I was healthy. I had been losing weight. I got down to about 150. I weigh right at 200 now. So I had this same frame, and I weighed 150 pounds. So you can imagine I was right skeletal. And so I thought that would help. And they go in there, this poor soul, he needs to go back and be fed. And they were right. But I'll tell you, people find this amusing, but I did not want to go. And I set my face like flint to flunk this. And so I had some things that I wanted to try to do. And I'd heard, you talk to your other buddies. None of them have been in, but they say, here's how you flunk this physical. Now, you can fake being a homosexual. I couldn't go there. I honestly considered it. You have to understand where my heart is. To go in, they'll talk to a shrink, so I did go to my family doctor, and I'd been stung by a wasp one time, and my hand had swollen up, and I'd been to the doctor. So I went to my family doctor, and I said, would you give me a doctor's letter? I'm supposed to go in for an induction physical, and I'm allergic to bee stings, and would you give me a letter for that? And he said, it won't do any good. And I said, yeah, but would you give me one? He said, well, sure. And he did that. And so I got me a doctor's letter. I was going to this induction physical. And I heard other things that would help you. And so on the morning that I was supposed to report, I did these things, all right? So I had heard that if you will wash your armpits with heavy soap and not rinse, let it dry, it will drive your body temperature, body heat up. And so on that morning, now you think I'm kidding, this is the truth. On that morning, I was soaping up under there, baby. Walking around letting it dry. This was no deodorant. This is soap, all right? And so once I got that dried out, I was ready for that part. And then I heard another thing. It says if you'll drink a bunch of syrup, it'll drive your blood sugar real high. And I thought, I'll do that. There's a history of diabetes in my family. I'll just run my blood sugar up real high. I got all I could find in the house was some Cairo syrup. You know what Cairo syrup is? I poured it out and drank me a glass of that. It's the things that we'll suffer. Syrup is good on biscuits and waffles and pancakes, but just when you drink it straight, it's not that good. So I did that, got myself set that way. Now, the day before, I'd gone out with my father, and we had gotten the shotgun shells. We went out in the country, and I don't know how many rounds I fired off. I shot that shotgun all afternoon long. Why? Because it'll make you a little deaf for a couple of days. When you go hunting, that's just a part of it. And so I thought, this time when they sit me down and start testing my hearing, I'll have impaired hearing. So I thought that was good. I did that. One last thing I had been told is if you'll take birth control pills, it will mess up. It'll mess up your hormones, and so you can get them to check that, and it'll be all messed up, and they'll get you out. And so I got one of these, birth control pills. I had the little pills that you take, you punch through. I can still see it today, that little thing, and I thought, I don't know, this might mess me up somewhere fundamentally, and so I could not do that. But I put them in my bag. I thought if things don't go well and I get there or something, I will take some and I'll see if I can get out. So put them in my bag, and away I went to this induction physical. I show up in those days I lived in Lubbock, Texas, and they bust you an hour up to Amarillo, hour and a half or whatever. And then you had the physical. So you go in there and you're sitting in what's called an AFES station. So I'd been there before for my physical, which I had passed, healthy. Now I'm saying I'm not going to be healthy this time. And I go in there, I'm ready for this physical. I know what's coming, walking around all day in your skivvies. And you go before a doctor. Well, actually, all of us are in there and go before a doctor, and he says, "Is anybody anything different from last time? Any doctor's notes or anything?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got a doctor's note." And I pulled it out and I gave it to him. And we're all fully clothed, and we'd just gotten there. And so he takes it. I can remember this too in my mind. So he looks at it. He's got my paperwork there. He looks at this note. He reaches over and gets a stamp. Pop! He gives me my paperwork, and it says passed. I said, uh-oh, I'm not going back home today. I was drafted. In 10 minutes I stand before the guy giving the oath of allegiance. When I thought I was going back to Lubbock, I wasn't going to Lubbock. I was going to Fort Ord, California. Do not pass go. Do not collect any $200. And so, I was devastated. I was just devastated, and I got a migraine headache and all this. And I go over there, and it was 100 degrees. I had on a short sleeve. It was 100 degrees there in August in 1970. And I get over to California, Fort Ord, which is Monterey. Finally get over there, and it's near midnight, and it's 40 degrees. And I'm standing out there, and I thought, and we get off the bus, and some guy gets out and he says, "Attend." And I thought, I'm really in here. This is real. This is not a nightmare. And so I'm in the Army. And, they start issuing, you get your hair cut and all this kind of stuff. Now, I'm in there. By this time, I'm not indifferent to God anymore. I am mad now. He wouldn't hear my prayer. He says he loves me, but it's a lie. I hate God. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm mad at him. I'm angry. I don't want to have anything to do with him. And so I'm in there. And you remember the birth control pills? This is in 1970. This is in the hippie days. And I'm out in California, West Texas farm boy who thinks he has a little bit of street smarts. But I get out there, and all these hippies have gotten drafted. Everybody's a California hippie, and all these guys with long hair and everything. And we get in there, and they've all got drugs. And so the drill sergeant one day gets us all, and we're standing at attention in this, in the Bay Area in our barracks. And he brings a trash can and slams it down in the middle of the floor, and he says, "I know some of you have drugs. It is contraband here. If you're caught, you will go to prison. But right this moment, you can give up your drugs. There'll be no questions asked. I'm going to leave the room. I want them put in this trash can." And I knew there was going to be a search. How am I going to explain these birth control pills? Listen, I'm as macho as the next guy. I did not want to be caught with birth control. Can you imagine? And so all these guys have got lids of grass and LSD, and they're walking up and dumping that stuff in here, and here I go. I dropped that in that trash can, and I knew I was in. I didn't have the courage to take them. I was in there. Now, to me, I could not have been given a more horribly wrapped gift, a more horribly packaged event in my life than to be drafted into the military. It didn't fit my plans. But I went in and served, did my thing. It was months later, and I was able then to bring my wife out there. And we lived out there in California. And I found that when she came out there, she had run with me, in my wildness. Change had been made. She had started going to church, and she had been praying she'd gone to this certain church and was praying with some guy on staff. And she liked him and would go to him, and he would pray with her for me out in California so that I'd not have to go to Vietnam and that she could get together with me. And his name was Dwight Ham. And so she comes out there, and she begins to put some gentle pressure on me. I'm not interested in God. I am less than interested. I'm antagonistic towards spiritual things. And to top it all off, she started tithing to Dwight Ham. I made $135 a month in that day in the military, and my rent was $120 a month. And before she got a job, it was tough. Beans would have been a luxury. So it was tight. She was tithing. It made me mad. Don't give our money away. We hardly have enough to eat now. But you know what? In that, we never went without. And in like 3 or 4 months' time, we had a new car. I mean, that's not part of the testimony I want to get here to you, but when she sold out and started tithing, that is where it really proves whether you're serving God or not. Just to be honest with you, you don't tithe, you haven't fully given your life to the Lord. Well, she did, and I didn't like it. She put other kinds of, I don't want to say pressure because she was not hard about it, but it was the Lord using all kinds of little things. Here I am, wanting to run from God, wanting to be far away from Him. And there are all kinds of things. I was a reader, and books would find their way into my hands that would have a spiritual lesson. I mean, a true Jesus-based spiritual lesson to me. I remember one of the books I read during that time was The Cross and the Switchblade by Dave Wilkerson. Ever heard of that? It's a good one still today to read, about the founding of Teen Challenge. Well, dealing with the gangs and those druggy kids, it just hit me between the eyes. It was a witness to me. And guys at work there would be guys that were believers in Jesus would pop up and say something every once in a while. Little sowing into my heart. I remember one time we went to San Francisco. Want to get up there, and see what that scene was like. It was kind of a drug haven back in the hippie days. And we get on the streetcar, and we're going up those hills and down. And we get off and go into a park, and there is some dude standing there preaching, preaching right in my face. And I was thinking at the time, I cannot get away from this. What is the deal here? And of course, my wife at that time was trying to get me to go to church. And you've heard me sing this little song I wrote later. It was all true about my experience of attending a Pentecostal church. I was raised Baptist, all right? And I had never been to a Pentecostal church, and that was kind of across the tracks, kind of thing, just to really take them seriously. It's not something I want to be involved with. And she got me to go to this church, and we were late. And we went in, and we were 15 or 20 minutes late from what it said on the sign it was supposed to start. And we go in, and nobody's doing anything yet. Well, there's a crowd of people, 30, 40 people up front. And so I'm a Baptist. We don't sit on the front. We sit on the back. So we go back and sit back there. And they come back there and introduce themselves and everything. And then they get up, and the preacher, he gets up, and he gets an electric guitar. Now, the guitar in church. See, that was so foreign to my upbringing and understanding. It was an electric guitar. There was an amp. He cranked that sucker up. The wife got on the piano, and I mean, they began to cook. And I thought, this is so different. When they started singing, everybody that was up front stood up and marched into the wings and came out into the choir loft, and that's where they sang. Everybody. So the congregation was my wife and me. Only my wife and me. Well, after that service was over, when I went home, I said, you'll never get me in a service like that again. Never. So the next time, I would do things like she would try to entice me to go to church, and I'd get lost on the way, driving around, and then we'd get to sightseeing. We lived in Monterey, California, and it was just beautiful. Go down by the beach, and next thing you know, service is over. We didn't find it. Oh, well, no big deal, right? So finally, she got me enough that I decided to go to another church. And I said, this time I choose. And so I saw this. I hesitate to mention the denomination, but I knew it would be colder, let's say, that it wouldn't be quite so emotional. I just wanted to go in, slip in, sit in the back, I wouldn't hear it, but let some guy preach, let them sing a couple of hymns, and then slip right out. I've done my duty. I've appeased my wife. Things are hunky-dory. I go in. Things are just cooked on just like I thought they would. Didn't touch me. I was hard. At the end, the pastor gets up. Before we go, everyone join hands. It made me mad. I didn't want to touch anybody. I didn't want any warmth. I didn't want any of this touchy-feely stuff. I don't want to have anything to do with that. Well, okay. And he prayed. See, all of this, I'm telling you all these things, is that God was hounding me. He wasn't letting me off the hook. He was using what I thought was a bad gift, a package, to plant little seeds in my heart. Let me tell you what my wife did. You've heard of Kenneth Hagin. Her parents gave her one of these old reel-to-reel tape players, and he has these sermons which talks about his visions of Jesus and the Lord appearing to him and giving instructions. Guess which sermons she chose? Those. And I would listen to those, and there's no way you can help being captivated by the fact that the Lord appeared and said some things to somebody. I mean, it's interesting. All of those things, he's piercing my heart, drawing me to himself. At the end of my tour of duty there, we were going to stay in California. I did not want to go back to dust-blown West Texas, which was the uncool capital of the world. I wanted to stay in California. 2 weeks before I was due to get out, the Lord, I believe it was the Lord, in both of us, put this great homesickness for those planes. And that had to be a sickness. It had to be. And I mean, we could not wait to get, we gave it up. We said, we're not staying here. I just want to go home. I can't wait to get back to West Texas and those tumbleweeds and stuff. And so we went back, and what was waiting for me there is that the church she had attended, her parents started going to. I started going there because it was, the thing to do, just to appease my in-laws. While we were gone out in California, the Holy Spirit had fallen on the place, and street kids got saved not by the score but by the hundreds. It just skyrocketed from 100 to now there are 20-something thousand in that church. But then there were a few hundred, and I mean it was revival, and God was moving, and I remember going in there and I was blown away. It was some of the same thing, some of the same type of worship that was in this little Pentecostal church, but God had me ready then to listen to what was said. And he drew me to himself. And I remember sitting there and I just made a decision. It was just gentle. Nobody was confronting me. Nobody was beating me about the head and shoulders. to try to coerce me to do anything. I just realized this is the way I need to go. And I made that decision to go with him, and it was fun, it was fulfilling, it was exciting, and I can't say for the first time I really had a relationship with Jesus, because I did in my childhood. But I came back, and as an adult, it was just so rich. It was like the weight of the world lifted off of me. It was like a whole new life for me. And when I stepped over that line of decision, and I didn't know anything, all I knew was I think this is the right thing to do. I didn't have any theology for it. I didn't have any understanding. I didn't have anything. I just realized this is something I need. I want what I see in these people. And I got it. And it's been great ever since, this 30 years or so that I've served him. But God used that military service, number one, just it alone matured me. It took me out of my childishness that I was involved in. And then he sowed himself in my heart to draw himself and draw me to himself. So that then when I got back to the place where he was moving, he just snared me and has had me ever since, and deeper. So now I say this to you this morning. This is my testimony of coming back to the Lord. I don't know why you're here this morning. Now, some of you are regular home folks, but I know that people show up at church because it's Christmas. You may be here to see these kids and their wonderful performance here a bit later. And when you look at your life, though, you may have made a decision like I did when I was 7 years old, but you didn't live up to your part of it. You may have been, for whatever reason, slipped off, and you are not red hot for the Lord. In fact, you may be mad at him today because of the way things have gone in your life, when it had nothing to do with him and had everything to do with your bad decisions. That may be where you are this morning. And it could be, and I don't know, because I can't read God's mind, but you may be here this morning by divine appointment. You may be here because, unbeknownst to you, he has nudged you and you have come in these doors and he's here for you. This may be one of those days that absolutely changes your life, because the day might be the day that you'll decide for Jesus. You may not understand everything. You may not even know that he's dealing with you until you step over that line and just give yourself. It's like a blind step of faith. You don't know what's over there. You don't really know what he's like. You feel his tug for you. You sense his love, and you may even sense his presence. But you don't know him, and so you don't know. Should I do this or should I not? And finally, the pressure just is so great that you just decide, I believe I'm going to do it. I don't know what I don't know what you're going to require of me, but I just give myself to you, and you take that step over the line. And you find that when you take that step, this huge weight comes off of your life. Huge pressure upon you just comes off of your life. I know what it is, but you won't. It's because your sins are forgiven. And now you'll begin to develop a relationship, a real, honest, intimate relationship with God. And there is nothing like it. If it is true, and it is true, that he is absolute love, then what you do when you give yourself to him is that you step into his love, and that love then becomes focused on you, and you become the recipient of it, and it is just wonderful. It is just wonderful. And so that may be you here today. And I'm going to ask you in a moment to make a decision. I was a dumb young man, dumb as a rock. But I had sense enough to say that I don't like where I am in life. I don't like the way I am, and I don't like the way my life is. So really, what have you got to lose? I give this thing to you. If you can do anything with it, fine. That's what I'm going to ask you to do. And he will do something with it. Will you bow your heads?